He said, "If you don't like my friend's rude jokes, you can just pay and leave." I said, "Thanks for the option." Then I stood up, took my car keys, and walked out of the restaurant. He thought I was joking until his friends' laughter died when they realized I had just paid for my meal only. I'm Olivia, 37, and I've been married to Ryan for 9 years. We have an 8-year-old daughter, Harper, who's honestly the light of my life. I work as a marketing director at a mid-sized tech company, pulling in about $89K a year, while Ryan works as a financial advisor making around $78K. Yes, I out-earn my husband, and apparently that's comedy gold for his college buddies. After Harper was born, I took 18 months off and worked part-time for 2 years before getting back on the career track. It took some hustle to rebuild my professional standing, but I've been steadily climbing back up. Ryan has this tight group of friends from college: Bryce, Callan, and Drew. They've known each other since freshman year, and honestly, they've never really grown up. What started as occasional ribbing about our modern marriage dynamics has escalated into full-blown disrespect over the years. Tonight was supposed to celebrate Ryan's promotion to senior advisor at his firm. I was genuinely proud of him and suggested we take everyone out to Hillstone, this nice steakhouse downtown. "My treat," I said, because I wanted to do something special for my husband's achievement. Everything started fine. Harper was staying overnight at my mom's, so it was just us adults. Drinks, appetizers, everyone chatting about work and weekend plans. Then, like clockwork, the comments started. "So, Olivia," Bryce began, cutting into his ribeye, "still playing boss lady at the tech company? Must be exhausting telling all those programmers what to do." I forced a smile. "Actually, I really enjoy the strategic aspects of campaign development. We just landed a major SaaS client last month that should boost our quarterly numbers significantly." "Oh, please," Callan jumped in. "It's not like marketing is brain surgery. You make pretty pictures and write catchy phrases, right? Ryan here deals with people's entire financial futures." Drew laughed. "At least someone in this marriage has a real job that requires actual expertise." I looked at Ryan, expecting him to say something, anything. He was smiling and shaking his head like, "Oh, you guys," but not defending me, not even slightly. The jokes continued through dinner. Everything from my corporate jargon to how I probably emasculate poor Ryan at home to Callan actually saying, "Honestly, dude, when are you going to put your foot down? A man should be the breadwinner, especially with a daughter watching." "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. "Just that kids pick up on family dynamics," Bryce shrugged. "Harper's probably confused about who's really in charge at home." The final straw came when Drew looked directly at me and said, "No wonder Harper's so assertive at playdates. She's learning from Mom that women should run everything while Dad just goes along with it." I set down my wine glass carefully. "Excuse me?" "Oh, come on," Bryce laughed. "Kids notice this stuff. She probably thinks Daddy's just the fun parent while Mommy makes all the real decisions. That's not exactly traditional family structure." "Don't talk about my daughter," I said firmly. "Whoa, sensitive much?" Callan smirked. "We're just saying kids notice when the family dynamics are, let's say, non-traditional. Might affect how she views relationships later." I turned to Ryan, my heart pounding. "Are you going to say something here?" Ryan sighed deeply, like I was being unreasonable. "Olivia, they're just joking around. You know they don't mean anything serious by it." "It doesn't feel like joking." "Oh my God," Drew said, rolling his eyes. "Here we go with the feelings talk. What's next? A PowerPoint presentation about microaggressions." That's when Ryan looked me dead in the eye and said it. "Look, if you don't like my friend's rude jokes, you can just pay and leave." The entire table went quiet for a beat. Then Bryce started chuckling. "Damn, Ryan, she really got told." I stood up slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Thanks for the option," I said, grabbing my purse. I pulled out my wallet and did quick math. My grilled salmon, 1 glass of Pinot Grigio, and coffee came to about $40. I put $50 on the table. "This covers mine and tip." Ryan's face changed completely. "Olivia, sit down. Don't be dramatic about this." I picked up my car keys. "Enjoy celebrating your promotion." As I walked toward the exit, I heard Callan say, "She'll cool off and come back in 5 minutes. They always do when they realize they're making a scene." I didn't go back. I made it to my car and sat there for several minutes, processing what had just happened. My hands were literally trembling. My phone started buzzing about 15 minutes later. First text from Ryan, "Very funny. Come back and we'll discuss this at home like adults." Then, "Olivia, this is embarrassing. My friends think you're being completely ridiculous." Then, "The bill just came. Are you seriously doing this right now?" I drove home to our suburban house, the one we bought 3 years ago, with a 30-year mortgage that still has us paying $2,800 monthly. More texts kept coming. The dinner bill was $195 for the 4 of them. They'd ordered expensive steaks, multiple drinks, appetizers, and desserts. I'd left $50. Ryan called 7 times on my drive home. I didn't answer. By the time I pulled into our driveway, he'd left 3 voicemails, escalating from annoyed to genuinely furious. I went inside and started thinking about Harper. What would she have thought if she'd witnessed that? What am I teaching her about how women should accept treatment from the men in their lives? She's already 8 years old, absorbing everything about how relationships work. I opened a bottle of wine and tried to process the evening. This wasn't just about one dinner. This was about a pattern I'd been ignoring for years. Ryan came home around midnight. I was in our bedroom, scrolling through my phone, trying to process everything. He was definitely tipsy and clearly frustrated. "What the hell was that, Olivia?" "That was me taking your suggestion," I said without looking up. "You know that's not what I meant. You embarrassed me in front of my friends. Do you have any idea how awkward the rest of dinner was?" "I embarrassed you? Ryan, they spent 2 hours insulting my career, our marriage, and brought our daughter into it. Where was my husband during that?" He sat on the edge of the bed, running his hands through his hair. "They were just giving you a hard time. It's what guys do when they're comfortable around someone. You're being too sensitive." "Too sensitive?" "They said our daughter is learning bad relationship dynamics from watching me run everything. They called my career fake, and you told me to pay and leave." "I didn't think you'd actually do it. Jesus, Olivia, it was supposed to be a celebration." I finally looked at him. "What did you expect me to do? Sit there and smile while your friends systematically tore down everything about my life? I expected you to be mature about it. Now Bryce is pissed because I couldn't cover the full bill, and they're all talking about how you threw a tantrum. That hit me wrong. You couldn't cover the bill? You're worried about owing your friend money, but not about how they treated your wife." We argued for another hour. Ryan kept insisting I was overreacting, that his friends were just being guys, and that I needed to apologize for walking out. I told him I needed time to think, and he stormed off to the guest room. The next morning, I called my best friend Whitney before Ryan woke up. I told her everything, including the part about Harper that had been haunting me all night. "Honey," Whitney said after a long pause, "you've been managing everyone's feelings in that marriage except your own, and now you're realizing Harper's been watching this whole dynamic." She was right. I'd spent 9 years smoothing things over, being the understanding wife, making excuses for behavior that would never fly in my professional life. Whitney came over after Ryan left for work. We talked for hours about patterns I hadn't really acknowledged. How I always defer to Ryan in social situations to keep peace. How I downplay my career success to make him comfortable. How I've been unconsciously modeling for Harper that women should shrink themselves to make men feel better. "What are you going to do?" Whitney asked. "I honestly don't know, but I can't keep living like this, especially not with Harper watching." Ryan texted around noon. "We need to talk when I get home. This whole situation is getting out of hand, and we need to fix it before it affects Harper." But here's what really bothered me. Not once had he apologized for what happened. It was all about how I reacted, how I embarrassed him, how I needed to fix this. Nothing about how his friends treated me, nothing about how he failed to defend me. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I opened a separate checking account at a different bank and transferred $3,000 from our joint savings. Not to hide money, but because I needed to know I had options. The financial advisor in me knew that if things got complicated, I needed independent access to funds. Harper came home from school full of excitement about a project she was working on. Watching her bright, confident face, I felt this overwhelming protective instinct. She was learning about relationships by watching ours. What lessons was she absorbing? "Mommy, why do you look sad?" she asked while doing her homework at the kitchen table. "Just thinking about grown-up stuff, sweetheart." "Is it about Daddy's friends? You always seem different when they come over." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "You get really quiet, and sometimes after they leave, you and Daddy argue. I hear you from my room." She'd been noticing for months, maybe years. My 8-year-old daughter had been watching me shrink myself to keep peace, learning that this was how relationships worked. "Harper, what do you think about that?" She considered this seriously. "I don't like when people make you sad, and I don't think Daddy should let them." Out of the mouths of babes. Ryan came home that evening, ready for the talk. He'd brought flowers and had clearly prepared some kind of speech about how we both needed to compromise and move past this. "The guys feel bad about last night," he started. "Maybe they went a little too far with the teasing." "A little too far? Look, I'll talk to them about toning it down when you're around, but you walking out like that was nuclear, Olivia. You can't just blow up our social life every time your feelings get hurt." That phrase, "every time your feelings get hurt," crystallized something for me. This wasn't about one dinner. This was about a fundamental lack of respect that I'd been accepting for years. "Ryan, I'm not asking you to choose between me and your friends. I'm asking you to choose between respecting me and allowing me to be disrespected. Last night, you chose to allow it. That's not fair. They're like family to me. And I'm your actual family. Harper is your actual family. We should come first." We talked in circles for 2 hours. Ryan kept coming back to the money, the social embarrassment, how his friends now think I'm controlling. I kept coming back to the basic respect issue and what this was teaching our daughter. Finally, I said something that surprised even me. "I think Harper and I need to stay somewhere else for a few days while I figure some things out." Ryan's face went white. "You're not serious." "I am. I need space to think about whether I can stay in a marriage where my husband won't defend me from his friends, especially when it's affecting how our daughter views relationships." "Olivia, you're talking about our family. You can't just take Harper away every time we have a disagreement." "This isn't a disagreement about chores or money, Ryan. This is about fundamental respect and what we're modeling for our child." I packed bags for Harper and myself while Ryan followed me around the house, alternating between anger and desperate attempts at reconciliation. He kept saying I was overreacting, that marriages require compromise, that I couldn't just leave every time we had a fight. This isn't a fight about household responsibilities or spending, Ryan. This is about fundamental respect and what we're teaching our daughter about relationships. You're being dramatic. We can work this out without disrupting Harper's entire routine. But I'd already decided. Harper and I went to stay with Whitney, whose daughter Emma is Harper's age. The girls were thrilled to have an impromptu sleepover, completely oblivious to the adult drama swirling around them. Whitney was incredible. She set up the guest room, made sure the girls had everything they needed for school, and gave me space to process without judgment. That first night, after Harper fell asleep, I finally let myself cry properly. "I keep thinking about what she said," I told Whitney, "how she notices that I get quiet around Ryan's friends. She's been watching this dynamic for years, learning that this is normal." "Kids absorb everything," Whitney agreed. "Emma went through something similar when her dad and I were having problems. She started apologizing constantly for things that weren't her fault because she'd watched me do that to keep peace." Ryan's texting started immediately. First, angry messages about how I was breaking up our family over nothing. Then desperate messages about how he loved me and wanted to work things out. But still, no real acknowledgement of what actually happened. By day 3, I realized I needed professional guidance. I called a family attorney that my coworker had recommended during her divorce 2 years ago. Not because I'd decided on divorce, but because I needed to understand my options. What would custody look like? How would we handle the house? What about Harper's school district? The consultation was sobering. Given that you've established temporary residence elsewhere, we'd need to formalize custody arrangements quickly, the attorney explained. Even though this is voluntary separation, prolonged absence from the marital home can complicate things legally. She walked me through the financial realities. Our combined income of $167,000 would be split. The $2,800 mortgage payment, utilities, Harper's activities, healthcare. Everything would need restructuring. I'd taken $3,000 from savings, but we'd need mediation to divide assets properly. The good news is you both seem committed to Harper's well-being. Courts favor arrangements that minimize disruption to children's routines. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. I ran into Callan's wife, Jessica, at Target. We'd never been particularly close, but she approached me in the cleaning supplies aisle. "I heard what happened at dinner," she said quietly. "I wanted you to know, I think what you did took courage." I was surprised. "Really?" "Olivia, I've been listening to those guys talk about women like that for 15 years. Callan comes home from those dinners and expects me to laugh along when he tells me about whatever woman they decided to critique that night. Why haven't you said anything to him?" "Because I didn't think I had a choice. But watching you walk out, maybe I do." She told me that Bryce's girlfriend, Amanda, had been questioning their dynamic too. Apparently, the guys had spent the weekend after the dinner strategizing about the Olivia situation over beers at Bryce's place, treating it like I was some employee who'd gotten uppity. "They're telling Ryan he needs to put his foot down and demand you come home," Jessica said, "like you're a rebellious teenager instead of his wife and partner." That conversation stayed with me. How many women in our social circle had been quietly enduring this boys' club mentality because we thought that's just how it was? Meanwhile, Harper was adjusting remarkably well to staying with Whitney. The girls did homework together, had elaborate tea parties, and seemed genuinely happy. But I caught Harper staring thoughtfully out the window one evening. "What are you thinking about, sweetheart?" "Is Daddy sad that we're not home?" "Probably, yes, but sometimes grown-ups need time apart to figure out how to be better to each other." "Like when Emma and I have a fight and then play separately until we miss each other?" "Something like that." "Will we go back home soon?" I sat beside her on the bed. "I don't know yet, but no matter what happens, Daddy and I both love you very much, and we'll always make sure you're safe and happy." She nodded seriously. "Mommy, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When Daddy's friends say mean things, why don't you tell them to stop?" The question hit me like a truck. "What do you mean?" "At Emma's house, if someone said mean things about her mom, Emma would tell them to stop. She wouldn't just get quiet like you do." I realized then that Harper hadn't just been noticing the tension. She'd been learning that women should accept poor treatment silently, that keeping peace was more important than self-respect. "You're right, Harper. I should have told them to stop. Sometimes adults make mistakes too." "Is that why we're staying here? So you can practice being braver?" "Maybe. What do you think about that?" "I think brave is better than quiet." Out of the mouths of babes again. That weekend, Ryan asked to take Harper for Saturday afternoon. I agreed, thinking it would be good for them to spend time together. When I picked her up that evening, she was unusually quiet. "How was your day with Daddy?" "Good, but Uncle Bryce came over." My heart sank. "What happened?" "He asked why we were staying at Auntie Whitney's house, and when I said because his friends were mean to you, he laughed and said you were being dramatic." "What did Daddy say?" Harper looked up at me with those serious 8-year-old eyes. "He told Uncle Bryce not to talk about it in front of me, but then Uncle Bryce said something about teaching me respect, and Daddy got really quiet, like you usually do. I felt my resolve hardening. Ryan still couldn't stand up to his friends, even when they were directly affecting our daughter's understanding of the situation. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I called the family attorney Monday morning and scheduled a formal consultation for the following week. That evening, I sat down with Harper and had the most important conversation of my life. "Harper, you know how Mommy and Daddy have been having some grown-up problems?" She nodded solemnly. "Well, I need to make some decisions about our family, and I want you to understand what's happening. Daddy and I might not live in the same house for a while." "Like Emma's parents?" "Maybe, but the most important thing is that we both love you completely, and we're going to make sure you're happy and safe no matter what." Harper was quiet for a moment. "Will I still see Daddy?" "Absolutely. You'll spend time with both of us. And if we do live separately, it doesn't mean we're not a family anymore. It just means our family might look a little different." "Okay, can I still do soccer and piano?" "Of course, sweetheart." The legal process moved faster than I expected. The attorney explained that because we both wanted to prioritize Harper's stability, we could work out a temporary custody arrangement through mediation rather than going to court immediately. Ryan was initially resistant, but when his own lawyer explained the alternatives, he agreed to mediation. Our first session was tense but productive. With the mediator's guidance, we established a schedule where Harper would spend weekdays with me and weekends with Ryan, alternating holidays. The financial arrangements were more complex. We agreed to list the house for sale, split the proceeds, and find separate places that Harper could be comfortable in. The goal, our mediator explained, is to minimize disruption to Harper while you both figure out whether this separation is temporary or permanent. During this time, something interesting happened in our social circle. Jessica finally confronted Callan about his behavior, using my situation as a catalyst. When he dismissed her concerns, calling her as dramatic as Olivia, she moved out too. Amanda broke up with Drew entirely after he suggested she was getting ideas from me about not tolerating disrespect. The boys' club was falling apart, and apparently, Ryan's friends blamed me for poisoning their girlfriends and wives against them. The irony was thick, but the most significant change came 3 weeks into our separation. Harper had been doing well with the new routine, but one Friday evening, she came home from Ryan's weekend visibly upset. "What happened, sweetheart?" "Uncle Bryce was at Daddy's house again, and he said you were trying to turn me against Daddy." My blood ran cold. "What else did he say?" "That I shouldn't listen to everything you tell me because mommies sometimes lie when they're angry, and that real families have daddies in charge." "What did Daddy say?" Harper looked down at her hands. "He told Uncle Bryce to stop, but not very loud. Then Uncle Bryce said Daddy needed to be more firm with both of us." That's when I realized the fundamental problem. Ryan might intellectually understand that he should defend us, but he didn't have the emotional strength to stand up to his friends consistently. He was more afraid of their disapproval than committed to protecting his daughter from their toxic influence. I called Ryan immediately. "We need to talk. Tonight." He came to Whitney's house after Harper was asleep. For the first time since this started, he looked genuinely shaken. "I heard what happened with Bryce," I began. "Olivia, I did tell him to stop." But not firmly enough. He felt comfortable enough to continue trying to undermine me to our daughter. "That's unacceptable." Ryan sat quietly for a long moment. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about what we're teaching Harper. And I started individual therapy. My therapist says I have trouble with confrontation because I grew up trying to keep my alcoholic father calm. I learned to avoid conflict rather than address it." This was the first real acknowledgement I'd heard from him. "That's a start, Ryan. But I need you to know something else. I told the guys they're not welcome at my place anymore if they can't respect you and Harper." "How did that go?" "Bryce called me whipped. Drew said I was choosing you over 15 years of friendship. Callan said they'd be there when I came to my senses." "And what did you say?" "I told them that my wife and daughter are my family, And anyone who can't respect my family isn't really my friend. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. What does this mean for us? I asked. I don't know yet, but I know I can't go back to who I was before. Whether we stay married or not, I need to be the kind of father Harper deserves. And that means standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. We started couples counseling 2 weeks later. The process has been difficult but necessary. Ryan is working with his individual therapist on understanding why his friend's approval mattered more than his family's well-being. I'm working on understanding why I accepted that dynamic for so long. Harper is thriving in play therapy, learning healthy ways to express her feelings about the changes in our family. Most importantly, she's seeing both her parents working to become better people. We're taking things slowly, no rushing back to how things were. Ryan has to prove consistently that he can prioritize our family over social pressure. I have to rebuild trust that he'll protect us when it matters. The house sold last month. Ryan found a 2-bedroom apartment 10 minutes from Harper's school. I found a similar place in the same neighborhood. We're officially separated but working toward possible reconciliation. Harper adjusts seamlessly between both homes now. Last week, she told me, "I like that Daddy listens better now and you smile more." Sometimes love means walking away from what isn't working, even when it's scary. Sometimes it means demanding better and refusing to settle for less. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it means the other person does the work to become worthy of coming back to. I don't know how this story ends yet, but I know Harper is learning that women don't have to shrink themselves for love, and that's worth everything.